Okay, everyone, it is time for me to talk about the special project that I've been working on for about a year now. And I'll even argue that this is something that's kind of been a lifelong thing that I've secretly been stowing away in my head. And now I am now finally to kind of get accomplished and express in some way, shape, or form. And I've talked about this in previous videos, but the way COVID has been and the restrictions that have been put on all our lives, I kind of got to a point where I was like, you know what? I'm not going to let this slow me down, and I'm going to find ways to be productive, and I'm going to find ways to have fun and enrich my life, even though the world has basically been shut down and they're trying to restrict us in every turn and corner. And I'm like, okay, maybe COVID's stopping me from doing certain things, but it's not going to stop me from doing other things that I'm interested in doing. So what is it that I decided to do? I wrote a book. That's the thing I did. If you'd asked me 10 years ago, I'd have been like, me write a book? That's insane. When am I going to find the time to do that? But again, with COVID and my job basically being, permanent telework right now, I don't have to drive to work. My commute's a lot, I'm saving all that time on my commute. And I got to a point where it was like, instead of filling that time with nothing, I decided to fill that extra time with something more productive. And one of those things was writing a book. Now, what is the book? The book itself is nonfiction and is a historical account of a film series that I am a fan of. And if you've known me for any length of time, if you've seen the thumbnail of this video, you already know which film series it is. It's Godzilla. I wrote a book about Godzilla. I am following in the footsteps of other Godzilla authors who have come before me. The Steve Reifels, the Ed Godzieski's. I apologize if I mispronounced your name, sir. The David Cowlitz of the world. There have been many, several people who have written books about Godzilla and I guess would be considered experts on the subject. And while those books exist, I felt like that I could bring a different perspective to it or cover a different ground that no other Godzilla author that I'm aware of has ever really tried to tackle. So, and this is something, again, I've been working on the book for about a year, but this is something I've been thinking about for years and years and years as a fan. Really ever since I got on the internet back in the 90s and I started really doing a deep dive into Godzilla research and everything. And one thing that's always stayed with me is that, the monsters and the battles and the monsters fighting each other and the whole spectacle surrounding that are really the main draws for a lot of people that come to watch these movies. They want to see big monsters beating the crap out of each other and tearing down model cities and all that jazz. And that's always like the big sell. I mean, look at Godzilla versus Kong. That entire movie was sold on Godzilla and Kong are going to fight each other. And that's typically the way it goes with these films. Every now and then you get something a little different, like the original film or Shin Godzilla, but typically it's about monsters fighting, and that's the main draw. But with that in place, there seems to be no consensus in the fan base. And this was true when I got on the internet at 11 years old, and it's true today. There seems to be no universal consensus on what Godzilla's win-loss record is, or even how to determine a win-loss record. Now, there are win-loss records out there, which I mentioned in the book. I cited several sources. There was the one that was on the internet back when I first got online and got on Godzilla websites back in 1996, and there was one that kind of floated around from website to website and was treated like the official win-loss record, even though I disagreed with it wholeheartedly in many cases. And there have been articles that have written win-loss records. Death Battle, the video series, when they did their Godzilla vs. Gamera episode, they had a win-loss record for Godzilla. There's also, I have Godzilla 2000 on DVD, the original American DVD release, and it has a Godzilla talent file on there, and as part of the bio on Godzilla, it has a win-loss record there. And the one consistent thing across all of those records is that they either don't show their work, so I don't know how they reach those numbers, and more likely than not, I'm going to disagree with those numbers. So I guess it's two things that they have in common. It's either I disagree with it, or I don't know how they reach those numbers. So what my book did, what I decided to do with my book, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this. So I went through all 36 Godzilla movies, plus non-Godzilla monster films that connect back to the Godzilla series. So that would include Rodan, that would include Mothra, the Rebirth of Mothra trilogy, Kong Skull Island, War of the Gargantuas, films like that. And so for a grand total of 51 movies, I decided to go back to all 51 movies that I determined were in scope, and I created a system to determine wins and losses for the monsters, because it isn't like Karate Kid or Rocky, where those operate, even though it's fictionalized, they operate in a sport where you can follow the rules and there are definitive winners and losers. And those things can be determined pretty easily. Godzilla is not so easy, because it's big monsters having no-holds-barred brawls. So I basically created a system for determining who wins, who loses, is it a draw, how they won, and then tallying up those scores and using it to determine a win-loss record, including win percentages for Godzilla and all of his monster co-stars. And that's why I included the non-Godzilla films that connect back to the Godzilla series, because I wanted Godzilla's friends and enemies to all have complete records as well. So even though Godzilla is the main subject of the book, and really the ultimate goal was to determine a win-loss record for Godzilla and document it, one that actually makes sense to me, I decided that I should give that same consideration and that same treatment to all of the other Godzilla monsters as well. So that's the whole basis of the book. It's like a stat book, a record book. I go through each film and break it down. First of all, I start off determining, all right, what is a monster and what is a fight? What constitutes a monster fight? And then I go through each of the 51 films, break it down, and then analyze each fight one by one, and then determine who won, who lost, and if it was a draw. And then I tally up those numbers and determine individual records for all of the monsters. And some of them it was pretty easy, because a lot of the monsters only appeared once or twice. Others it was very hard, like the Ghidorahs and the Mothras and the Rodans, and the ones who have made multiple appearances. Mechagodzilla is another one. But the goal was to create a working record book for Godzilla and all the other monsters that inhabit the Godzilla series. And it was actually a very hard process to go through. Granted, I'm not going to begrudge going back and watching old Godzilla movies, but it was a long process to kind of watch all these movies with a notebook. In some occasions, I changed my mind on certain fights. Rebirth of Mothra 2 in particular had one where I remembered it being one way, and then watching it again, I was like, no, I was actually wrong. I'm going to change my result on that one. Because again, it's like there are no rules. There's no like official ruling within the fictional universe of these giant monsters. But basically what I'm trying to do is like bring a sports logic, or as much of one as I can possibly bring to a fantasy world full of god-tier titans, and determine who the winners and losers are, and then record it in a record book. So that's what I've been up to, and that's what I've been doing, and I'm happy to report that first draft was completed a couple weeks ago, and I started submitting it to literary agents to try and get it published. And the immediate feedback I got from one source basically said, book is too long. And let me pull it up, actually. Let me read what he sent. Let me make sure I get this word for word. I'm not going to say who sent this, because I'm not like angry that he said this. I just thought it was funny, and he's not wrong. Like I don't disagree with him. It made me realize I needed to make some changes. All right, this is. And keep in mind, I wrote a query letter, a proposal, which I didn't know I had to do that. I had to write a full proposal for this thing too. I did all of that and basically explained the whole concept of the book. And this was the only feedback I got from this literary agent. Whoa, that's a long book. We know of no publisher who seeks such. Will pass. That's all he wrote. So I'm not even convinced he read or even like read the title of the book or knows what it's about. He just saw how long it was. He was like, absolutely not. And I was like, nope, we're not doing it. And when I mentioned in my last video that I watched the film Nightmare Alley, which I enjoyed, but at the same time I was like, you could have shaved half an hour off of that, and I think you would have been just fine. And after watching that movie, I realized, I was like, my book's too long. They're right. Like, I should work on shortening that. So I am now in the process of trimming the fat of the book and breaking it into volumes. I'm aiming for 2 volumes. The Showa era would constitute volume 1. For you non-Godzilla fans out there, the Showa era is the 50s, 60s, and 70s run of Godzilla movies. And then the second volume would be the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and into the 2020s with Godzilla versus Kong. And then Volume 2 would have the absolute, like, complete record, with all the information consolidated. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now. And kind of breaking that down. And just to give you an idea of how long the book was initially, my first draft, when it was done, and I proofread everything, and I checked all my sources, and I worked through it, reworded everything, 915 pages. I mean, this is coming from a guy who, when he was in school, like, the idea of writing a 15-page paper, which I had to do to graduate high school, was daunting to me. And here I, like, with relative ease, wrote a 915-page book. Like, just with... And when I say relative ease, it's just kind of like, I didn't intend for it to be that long. It just, the book kind of got away from me. And I realized when I got that feedback and I kind of thought about it for a bit, it's like, yeah, that needs to be trimmed down and broken down. So instead of being 915 pages, I've cut some stuff out, the stuff that absolutely didn't need to be there. And I broke it down into volumes, more manageable books. So I think, I had it written down. Volume 1, right now as it stands, they're not done yet, but right now as it stands, Volume 1 is 360 pages. And Volume 2 is 473 pages. So a little bit more manageable than that 900-page monstrosity that I didn't send the full manuscript to any literary agents, but I'm sure seeing that page count and that word count in there, like, was intimidating, to say the least. And they were like, absolutely not, we can't do this. So, but yeah, so I'm currently working on shipping it around to literary agents and working on getting the book edited, published. And this is the least fun part of it, to be perfectly honest, because I don't like, I'm not a very good salesman, admittedly, so, but I believe in what I wrote. I believe in this, this concept, and I believe that Godzilla fans will absolutely buy this book, and I'll say straight up, Godzilla fans are not going to universally agree with all of my judgments. There were some fights that were very, very tough calls, and I had to think about once, twice, 3 times a lady, and it was some of them were big judgment calls, and there is going to be some debates, and my record will not be universally agreed upon, but I think it's going to spark discussion among the Godzilla fan base, and I think people can have fun with it. And really, it's about highlighting the aspects of these movies that made them so appealing and drew a bunch of kids in, like myself. It was Godzilla fighting larger-than-life monsters, and this book is designed to kind of have fun with that, while also injecting kind of a baseball card mentality into dealing with Godzilla in a world full of monsters and monster battles. So that's what I've been working on. That's what I've been doing. And I do have a plan in case, like, no literary agent is willing to take me on and no publisher is interested in this book. I can always go the self-publication route. That was an option that's always been on the table for me. With that said, is this going to be like a new career path for me? Am I just going to write books for the rest of my lives? And am I going to be just an author forever and quit my job and do all this other stuff? Probably not. I have no intention of leaving my job. As for me writing other books, my decision was, let's see how this one goes. Let's see what the experience was like. See if what I wrote connects with anybody. Let's see how that goes. And if I'm overall satisfied with the experience, then I would, go ahead and do it again with other books. I have an idea for another Godzilla book, because I just can't let that big lizard go. And for you wrestling fans out there, because this is a predominant professional wrestling channel, I have an idea for a WrestleMania themed book that's kind of in the same vein as this Godzilla monster fight record that I've just written. And not exactly the same, but it's kind of cut from that same cloth. It would involve me going through each and every WrestleMania in history and performing some kind of an analysis on them. But that's far off into the future. I don't even want to think about that until I'm completely through this one. So we will see how all of that goes. But yeah, tell me what you all think. And if you all have any advice as far as promoting the book, selling the book, and doing whatever, I'd be happy to hear from you. Again, this is a totally new experience for me, and I'm just looking to find ways to learn and get better at this, basically. So we'll see how it goes. But for right now, thanks again, everybody, for listening. And if you're curious about more, feel free to ask, and I will address your questions as soon as possible. But you can always leave comments down below. I'm typically pretty good about responding to comments. But that's all I have for now. Thanks again, everybody, for listening, and I'll see you all later.